So what exactly happened to Vera de Ucrania, and what can we learn from it? In this video, we're gonna talk about who Vera is, tell her story in English, since she told it in Spanish, while highlighting some important facts as I'm retelling her story. And in the end, I'm gonna tell you the 6 most important takeaways that you need to know from everything that happened to Vera, as well as the situation in the country. So who is Vera? Vera is a Ukrainian YouTuber who talks about Ecuador and Ukraine. She's been to Ecuador 4 times. And the reason she comes is to get to know touristic places, pretty places here in Ecuador. She really loves Ecuador. That's why on her channel she highlights the things that she does here in order to show off this little piece of paradise. Because of what happened, Vera does say that getting robbed as a foreigner is easier than getting robbed as an Ecuadorian. But is that really the case? Well, we'll answer that later on, but first, let's understand exactly what happened to Vera. 2 things to remember before we begin. The first is that Vera absolutely loves Ecuador. She has nothing but good memories about Ecuador, but she felt the need to talk about what happened. And 2, this video and Vera's video were not made with the purpose of talking poorly about Ecuador. They were made with the purpose of informing and analyzing the situation here in case you're planning to come, so that you know exactly what's going on in Ecuador. So, the story. As I mentioned before, Vera had been in Ecuador 4 times, but she had never visited the coast, and it was her dream to see the ocean in Ecuador. So on this occasion, she decided to go to the beach in Atacames in order to make her dream come true. Now, Vera had actually heard the news that it was kind of unsafe to travel to the coast of Ecuador. But some Ukrainian friends had told her that they were recently there in Atacames and that nothing had happened to them. Not to mention the fact that Vera had not seen any unfortunate news happening in Atacames, which was good. Now, the first thing I'd like to note is that the coast isn't the only unsafe place in Ecuador. There are other places that are unsafe as well, just that the coast is more known to be unsafe. So Vera and her group went out on a Friday, and according to her, they went out with plenty of anticipation. But they were met with a lot of traffic going towards Santo Domingo. And that traffic held them up so much that it was 10 p.m. by the time they finally hit the highway. And by that time, they were about 2 hours away from Atacames. Now, something to note here is that I think that it's great that Vera and her group decided to go out with plenty of anticipation. But either the traffic was just absolutely awful, or they didn't go out with enough anticipation. Because for them to hit the highway at 10 p.m., that is way too late. I never recommend anyone to travel at nighttime, especially with how dangerous the situation is right now. So while they were on the highway, they reached the part that was poorly paved. Basically, a surface that was probably rocky or something of the sort. And that made it impossible for them to go at a normal speed. On that part of the highway, they reached a curve. And on that curve, a car got in front of them, stopped, the people in the car got out, pulled out guns, started shooting towards the sky, and started approaching Vera and her group and telling them to open the car. Now, you might be thinking that that sounds crazy, or that that's something that you only see in the movies. And that's actually what Vera herself said, and adding to that, she also said that she had heard people telling her that that's actually something that happens. And people have even told me that situations like that happen, but it's just so hard to believe until you actually go through it. And in this case, it's very unfortunate that it happened to Vera. Once these criminals reached the car, they entered the car and one of them actually hit Vera with the back of their gun. Then they covered her and her friend with a blanket or something of the sort, and Vera assumes that this happened so that her and her friend wouldn't know where they were taking them. which she also mentioned was kind of weird because it was already dark and she couldn't see. Now, I do have to say that even I find it strange that they covered her and her friend with a blanket, but the alternative to that is definitely much, much worse. Now, just to explain what I mean by the alternative, there was a time in Ecuador where criminals would drug people using something called escapolomina, which I don't know what that is in English, but what I do know is that the effect of that drug was that you would pretty much do whatever the person was telling you to do. So between the blanket and the drug, I definitely think the blanket was much better. After that, they took Vera and the group to a deserted, dark, forest-like place. Once there, they took the driver out of the car and started tying up his hands. At that point, Vera thought the absolute worst was going to happen. Honestly, from the outside looking in, I'm not surprised that Vera expected the worst, because she was already in a very, very, very horrible situation. Once they had the driver's hands tied up and everything, they took Vera and her friend out of the car and they threw all of them into a hole. Vera assumes that this hole and this whole area was a place that was already prepared for the victims of these people. And after they were all thrown in the hole, one guy with a gun stayed with Vera and the group, and two other guys went to the car and they just took off. Vera mentioned that they took everything they had on them, including phones, money, documentation. She was even surprised when the robbers took their shoes. And it really doesn't surprise me that they took everything, even the shoes, because that's just what robbers do. Even though the guys left, they did stay in touch with the guy who stayed with Vera and the group in order to ask for the passwords for the phones and the credit cards, of course. And something that Vera said, which I think is very true, is that in a situation like that, you would think that you would say, oh, I don't remember, or oh, I don't know. But in that situation where she thought that it was pretty much over for them, she couldn't help, well, her and her group couldn't help, but tell them everything that they asked for. According to Vera, they had apparently spent the whole night there, a total of around 6 hours, through rain and all of that physical and mental abuse. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, the guy who was left watching them said that they could go in 15 minutes. He even gave them instructions as to how to reach the highway. Now here, me and Vera actually thought the same thing, which was, it was strange that the guy was letting them go. So she actually thought that the guy was waiting somewhere close by, just waiting for them to leave, and then when they were off guard, that he would just shoot them. Personally, the only thing I would have to add to that is that the guy would be waiting around there just to see if any of them had a form of communication and was gonna communicate to the police about what had happened at that moment. But anyways, after the 15 minutes were up, Vera and her group decided to get up and go towards the highway. They went walking shoeless, and eventually they did see a house somewhere along the highway with lights on and people actually outside drinking and playing games. They approached the group and asked them to call the police, but the group of people were actually afraid of Vera and her group, and they were actually going to call the police on Vera and her group. I will say that the reaction of the group of people that they found does not surprise me. There is sometimes the fear that people will act like they're vulnerable in order to rob you. So they probably saw that and were a little bit skeptical about the whole situation. So after a bit of talking to the people and convincing them that they weren't going to do them any harm, one person from the group offered to take them to the police station. When they went to the police station, they found no one there. They even called out to see if someone would answer, but no one did. They had to stay until around 6:30 a.m. and then 2 police officers showed up. But those 2 police officers said that their shift was ending and that they had to wait until 7 for the next group of police officers to show up. Now, I have no idea how it is everywhere in the world, but I find it incredibly awful that you can find a police station that is completely empty. Like, seriously? Don't you have like weapons in there and like things that you would not want people going in to try to take? I just have no idea. Then Vera said that the good thing was that the police actually let them call their family, to let them know that they were safe, but that was where the help from the police ended. The police then said that Vera and her group could go search for the car in the immediate area, but it wasn't in the immediate area. And after that, if they wanted to denounce the crime, they had to do it in a different city, which they obviously did. I find it incredible, once again incredibly bad, that the least the police could do was let Vera call her family, and that basically she just had to be grateful that they let her do at least that little. It makes no sense. Then Vera goes on to explain more of the police's incompetence. First, the fact that her friend went on Monday to talk to the police to see if they could help him search for the car, and the police tells him that they can't because they only have one car and that all the motorcycles are busted is just beyond wacky. And if that weren't bad enough, the police said that Vera's case was the third case that had happened in 2 weeks. So let me get this straight. The same thing has happened 3 times in the process of 2 weeks, and you, the police, have done nothing about it? Like, how do these people still have their jobs? And Vera is very much in agreement with me on this because even she finds it very surprising that the police can so nonchalantly say that this has happened 3 times and they're not doing anything about it. Like, if you know where the crime is happening, why don't you stop it? The good thing, and looking at this very much as not really a good thing, but well, better than nothing, is that her friend did find the car, searching for it himself, of course. And she makes a heavy emphasis that everything after finding the car was a process that just involved a lot of money. Money to call the police. Money to check if the car was his. Money to take the car to a place where they had to do some kind of procedure. Literally everything was money, because without money, she said that the police would not do their jobs. Heck, she even said that if you don't give them money, the police act like they don't see or hear anything. Now that we know Vera's story, what are the most important things that you need to take away from what happened to Vera? The first thing that you need to know is that not all Ecuadorians are bad. If you go through the comment section of Vera's video, there are a lot of Ecuadorians who are apologizing to Vera for the action of some Ecuadorians, not all of them. Not every Ecuadorian that you meet in Ecuador is going to rob you. And I definitely don't want anyone to come here scared of Ecuadorians because of what some of them are willing to do. The second thing that you need to know is that Ecuador is going through some serious stuff, but not all of Ecuador is unsafe. I have gotten this question a lot where people ask me, is Ecuador safe? Is it safe to travel to Ecuador? But remember, if you talk about Ecuador, the whole country, there's a lot of space to talk about. While Ecuador itself might be very small, there are various provinces, various cities that you can go to, and not every city is going to be dangerous. Even if, for some reason, 90% of Ecuador were dangerous, that would still leave 10% that you could easily go to and not have anything happen to you. And while I can't exactly tell you which cities are safe and which cities aren't safe, from what I've heard, the safest cities are Galapagos, Loja, and Cuenca. So if you're looking for places where it's much less likely for something to happen, take into consideration those 3 that I just mentioned. The third thing that you need to know is that the mode of transportation is very important, but it's equally important that you check what time of day you travel. In Vera's story, she literally went in a car with friends and something bad happened to her. Does that mean going in cars is unsafe? Not at all. But the time of day that she was in that car and the place that she just happened to go by, a terrible combination. When I played out the story that she told in my mind, I imagined it like this. They were in the car, driving towards the beach. They didn't get out early enough, and that's considering she said that they got out pretty early already. It became nighttime, which is why I think that she didn't get out early enough, because if you're going to the beach, I don't think you're really gonna go at night. Everyone has their preferences, but that's just my opinion. You make it to a road where you're forced to drive slowly. It's dark, there was probably no one around. Everything in that story was just a recipe for disaster. So remember, vehicle, definitely very important. Because in a bus, that situation could have been much worse. And even worse in a motorcycle, because you don't even have doors to protect yourself with. But also remember that the time of day, equally important. At nighttime, these things do tend to happen a lot more than if you're traveling during the day. The fourth thing that you need to know, we're going to call wrong place, wrong time. Basically what I mean by this is that Vera didn't go there expecting to get robbed. She didn't go to a place that she assumed was going to be dangerous. It just happened to be the wrong place at the wrong time. Another good way to look at this is through an example. Imagine that we have a person, let's call them Bob, and they go to a store. They go to this store at 9 p.m. They go in, they buy something, they come out, nothing happens to them. Now let's imagine the same store, but this time we have Darnell going a different day, but at the same time as we had Bob go. Darnell goes in, he buys something, but boom, the store gets robbed. Does that mean that the store is dangerous? No, of course not. Does that mean that Darnell just happened to go a day and a time and at a store that just happened to get robbed? Yeah, it's a coincidence. When you're here or anywhere in the world, you can run into a variety of coincidences. And that's basically what this was. A very unfortunate coincidence. The fifth thing that you need to know is to not expect the police to help you if something bad happens. As much as I'd like to say that what happened to Vera and her friend are an isolated case with the police, it actually isn't that way. A lot of the times, people have to fight to get the police to do anything at all. And like Vera herself said in her story, money does get the police to do their job. And remember, being a policeman isn't a job where someone has to go and give you money for them to do something. It's a job that they're being paid to do and they're not doing it. So clearly, something is very wrong here. And the sixth thing that you need to know is that you should definitely ask someone, preferably a local, about what's going on in the part of the country that you're planning to visit. There's a lot of general and specific advice that me, Don Shader, Amelia and JP, that we can give you since we live in Ecuador and we have a lot of experience here. But we each live in a specific city, and the things that are asked of us aren't always about the city that we live in, and they are generally things that are very dynamic. What this means is that while our information might be very accurate, it might be more specific to our city or our region, and the things that are dynamic, they're things that change from one moment to the next. A good example of this is the weather, which might be awesome today in my city and in all of Ecuador, but tomorrow it might still be awesome here, but it might be really bad in the place that you want to go to. So it's much better to get the information from the source. And going back to the question, is it easier to rob a foreigner than it is an Ecuadorian? Honestly, being a foreigner has nothing or very little to do with it. While it is true that the common thought is that foreigners have a lot of money and a lot of expensive items, what truly makes a person a target is their lack of preparation. Ecuadorians know the things that they can and can't do. And if you want to know them too, then make sure you check out this video here, where me and my friend Roberta tell you things not only related to theft, but also cultural things that you can and can't do in Ecuador. Make sure to send some love and support to Vera. If you'd like to support me, you can become a member here or on buymeacoffee.com. Take care, and as always, ace out.